sound and buddy. Rouser Radio. Picnicking today. Because it is a great day outside. Oh, I'm tempted to go for my cognac and coffee a little later. About Lewis, there are plenty of places open at 7 o'clock in the morning to get coffee. Not so sure about the cognac. Anyway, time to rouse, Rouser Radio, join us. And a very good morning, Keith Hayes in Lewes, East Sussex, and it is now 6:32. But we started on time this morning. Jack DeManio got left behind. You know, people say to me, "Who the hell's Jack DeManio?" But if you're of my age, you would know. Perhaps one of the most famous DJs, of course they didn't call them DJs in those days, they called them presenters, but one of the most famous DJs that the BBC ever had. And dear old Jack could never get there on time. He could never give the right time. He could never give the right day. He could never give any of the right information out. And people were found hurtling to work on a Sunday morning because he said it's time to get up and go to work. He was... he was quite a character, and the BBC, I must say, for all his faults, has turned out some marvellous characters over the years. Anyway, here we are this morning and ready to picnic because the weather outside is terrific. I just wish that we didn't have lockdown, but we are blessed in Lewes because there are a number of places that you can stay fairly well away from people, and yet they're very, very pleasant. The Grange Southover Park is one of them. My summer office is down there in the Notts Garden. I go and tuck myself away when I want to be quiet and do some thinking and do some interesting work. And the Notts Garden is, by the way, a symmetrical garden. That's what a Notts Garden is. It's all laid out to a plan. And this one's fairly tiny, but it's got wonderful hedges, wonderful plants, benches where you can sit down and be very quiet. My favourite place. But the rest of the park is terrific as well. And it used to be the garden of the Newton family who lived in the Grange. And the Grange is, I think, built in the 1500s. That would be it, because that's when the Priory was pulled down, and the dear old Newtons rushed down there and picked up all the decent bricks, and they built the Grange from it. But the Newtons were the Puritan family of the time in Lewes, and when the Royalists set out to take East Sussex from their base in West Sussex, that's where they headed for, is Lewes. It was the biggest town in the area, and also the Newtons, being very pro-Cromwellian, were here. They got waylaid at Haywards Heath by a force put together by the family of Glynde at Glynde. There was a battle. The Royalists lost 200 men. Nobody knows how many the Cromwellians. For some reason, they didn't keep that number. But, you know, the funny thing is that victory is always put out by the victor, not by the loser. So we don't know how many people were lost on the Cromwellian side. But anyway, the Royalists were put to flight, sent back to, I think it was Arundel and Chichester, and Lewes was saved, and so were the Newtons. So we've got a wonderful park today because that was their garden. It was only part of their garden. In those days, landowners had huge tracts of land. I mean, the Lewes Castle, huge amounts of land attached to it. And of course, these were whittled down as time goes on. These institutions fell into disrepair, and also life changed dramatically. People didn't live in castles very much anymore. However, that's not true of the people at Arundel. Their castle is extremely well preserved, and the living quarters are actually beautiful. If you've never been there, take a look. And they also have a cricket ground there, which is sufficiently good to host first-class cricket. And Sussex play down there from time to time. And a wonderful attribute it is. Well, I got that out of the way, didn't I? That is... Oh, I didn't mention the Priory. I did mention the Priory, but I didn't say also that is a wonderful green area. The ruins of the Priory, which was built in 1079, the framework is still there. It's quite remarkable. I mean, you go and see what workmen did in 1069, and the fact that it's well over 1,000 years old is remarkable, absolutely remarkable. Yes, they are only ruins. The good burghers, including the Newtons of Lewes, went and nicked all the nice stone from the facade, but that was only after Henry VIII, the Vandal, and his pal Thomas Cromwell, who eventually got his head cut off because he chose the wrong wife for the king. But they actually had to use dynamite or powder or whatever. Anyway, they blew it down, and even then they couldn't get rid of most of it. But what a institution it was in its day. It must have been absolutely magnificent. But now there are large green areas down there, a lovely park. At one time, some lovely ladies, Helen Chiasson, and I know that Sarah Clues had something to do with it. They had a candlelight evening of music. You took your picnic along, and you listened to a choir, and it cost something like $5, as opposed to a lot of the open air concerts here that cost $55. And it was a very, very pleasant evening. And you know, we talk about community. Oh yes, you can read every day in the papers about community and how wonderful people are, and they do this, that, and the other. They couldn't find enough volunteers to handle the various entrances and to help with the organisation. How sad. So we lost something, and I hope that post-lockdown that we get it back. Good for you, girls. Go for it. Helen, incidentally, is in charge of the education department at the Priory, and boy, is there a story to tell there. There really is a story from Gundrada on, and William de Varenne on, who built the thing after seeing one in France. And it has a history ever since, including the Battle of Lewes, where the terrified monks found Simon de Montfort's troops hacking at the door because the king had decided to feast there. It was a feast day. He'd got his feet up in front of the fire with a turkey leg in his hand. Now, what's wrong with that statement? Yes, 1264. We ain't got turkeys yet, because nobody had been to the New World. Don't know what we're supposed to call the New World anymore. Everybody's so afraid of calling everything everything. Anyway, let's say the Americas. Shall we say the Americas? Anyway, that's all a wee bit of history, and it's time now, I think, to go on a picnic. So let's listen to a nitpicky picnic by the Whole Other. Here we go. nitpicky picnic. It'd be lovely to get outside and have a picnic, and it is possible still. But the sad news is that the virus seems to be on the way back, and they are worried that next month is August, isn't it? It's only 2 days away. After next month in September, we may have a resurgence, a respike of the virus. And there are still people who cannot take this seriously, despite the fact that they may go and they mingle, and amongst those that they mingle with, somebody catches the dreaded thing. Maybe not fatally, but they catch it, and it's not a very pleasant disease. Poor old politicians there. I'm always on their case, even though I know a number who are quite nice, really, and they know that I'm always on their case because I'm a journalist. And actually, of course, journalists and politicians get along perfectly fine. They recognise that they're on different sides of the street and that they've got to take pot shots at one another. Sometimes it's hard to know who is winning because the journalists can rip the politicians apart in their newspapers and on radio programmes and television programmes and so on and so forth. The journalists come back and the politicians come back and spread the word is really this is all fake news and journalists aren't to be trusted and it's all the fault of the media. It's a very good contest, really. The only thing is that out of it quite often comes a service to the public, but if nothing else, it keeps us democratically free. I've worked and lived in countries which are not fully democratic, in fact some not democratic at all, and it is no fun, believe me, it is no fun. And there are still so-called emerging democracies who are tossing their journalists into the jug and who refuse to let them into press conferences. Ha, you may say. Well, now, Boris has been accused of that. And yes, he has, which is damn silly because the journalists work together. The one nice thing about actually it's disappearing, I suppose, which is sad. But the reason the journalists were always in the pub was that no journalist could cover an entire beat. And they would share, as long as it wasn't a scoop, they would share information. And one would go to one press conference and one would go to another and they would go and chat about it. They would pair off. And it all worked perfectly well, except that we got this American thing about booze. And the boozing that journalists did has, generally speaking, started to ease away, as if it's some sort of, virus. What a pity, because it was the boozers, the pubs, which made us a free media, a free press, because no government could destroy what was going on. Actually, one of the interesting things is that it was a trick of the old communists. I can remember the first time that I went into East Berlin, and a chap who had been there before, a journalist who had been there before, said to me, right, when we drive along here, he said, see if you could spot a pub. It was very, very difficult.